Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to The Plant Path. And in this episode, I'm going to be discussing the anatomy of a formula, what I think of as the ultimate antiseptic triplet. And, as I talked about last week, I'm not a huge fan of thinking about herbs in the anti-context, quote unquote, right? Whether we're thinking of them being antimicrobial or antibacterial or antiviral. And I've been really against it for a really long time. I'm starting to embrace the usefulness of this understanding a little bit more. But to hear the full in-depth discussion of some of my thoughts on that, be sure to check out last week's post called The Anti-Herbs for more information on that. But in this episode, what I would like to do is kind of continuing along with this theme of the anti-herbs is break down a formula, break down a triplet of herbs that has traditional indications for, various bacterial, viral, pathogenic, infectious type states. And this one comes from the BHP, or the British Herbal Pharmacopeia, and it consists of 3 herbs. One would be Allium sativum, or garlic. The second would be Baptisia tinctoria, wild indigo. And the third is Echinacea. And generally, when we're talking about Echinacea, we prefer Echinacea angustifolia if you can acquire it, which can be rather difficult. So otherwise, Echinacea purpurea will just have to do. Now, as I said, the traditional indication for this triplet were general bacterial or viral infection. Now, first, I want to make a note here. Note that it says it is indicated for bacterial or viral infection, not necessarily that the triplet in and of itself is antiviral or antibiotic, quote unquote, right? But no, it is indicated for viral and bacterial infections. It's very important to think of that in a broader term, right? And I talked about this a lot last week, but I'll just reiterate the point here, which is that when you see that, this triplet is indicated for viral bacterial infections, don't fall into the trap into thinking that that means that this triplet of herbs is just going to go in there like Navy SEALs and assassinate all of these bacteria or viruses or whatever, right? Don't get too stuck in a militaristic way of thinking about it. Of course, some of these herbs do have some direct, when constituents of the herb come into contact with, say, a bacteria, let's just say those bacteria will not continue to thrive very well in the environment of that herb, garlic being a pretty prime example of that. But we have to think a little more broadly, a little more holistically about what these herbs are going to be doing to ultimately support the body in its capacity to fight off these types of infections. And I think that's the important thing to consider about medicinal plants and how they are helpful for pathogenic infections, is that they aren't just necessarily killing the bug, so to speak, but rather they are supporting the body to kill the bug, right? I mean, your immune system is way more sophisticated and refined in its response to these pathogens, and it has specifically been designed and evolved throughout a very long period of time to deal with these types of things. Sometimes it just needs a little bit of help. And more often than not, the herbs are helping the body to do what it needs to do more efficiently and effectively. So what I'd like to do here is talk about each of these herbs a little bit, talk about some of their synergies, talk about some of their similarities, their overlaps, talk through some of their differences, share a little bit about how you might combine these herbs. Especially that part's going to be very important because we got some very strong herbs in this formula, especially wild indigo is very strong. You got to be a little careful with that herb. Now, Echinacea and wild indigo is a very powerful pairing of herbs that goes back quite a ways in North American herbalism. This is a pair used both by the eclectics and the physiomedicalists, and was used extensively for a wide range of infectious states. So we see, when you kind of go through some of those older books, it's not uncommon to see Echinacea and Wild Indigo paired together as a base with other herbs added to it, right? So you'll see Echinacea, Wild Indigo, and golden seal, Echinacea, Wild Indigo, and garlic, Echinacea indigo right as a foundation. So that pair is a very powerful pair. It is rooted in tradition. It is very, very strong. And it actually is the base for, what's the name of it? A product. I think it's a German-made product. I think it's a patented herbal product. I believe Asparatox is the Echinacea indigo, Wild Indigo. And just a side note, Wild Indigo, it's got indigo. This is not a purple flowered plant. It's actually a yellow flowered plant. A lot of people mix that one up. There are a number of different species of baptisia, but the traditional one is the Baptisia tinctoria. That really is the one that you want to use. And it is really best prepared fresh. So let's talk about Wild Indigo a little bit more. So this is a very powerful plant. I classify it as a low dose herb. It is very strong. If you take too much Wild Indigo, you will not be a happy herbalist. It can induce vomiting. Some people can be very sensitive to this herb, so it can trigger pretty intense gastrointestinal upset, pain, nausea, vomiting. So you got to be a little careful with it, but man, it's really, really good. So this plant is I tend to think of Wild Indigo as a very powerful alternative. Okay. So specifically to clear heat coupled with dampness, especially in the blood. So a blood heat pattern, typically we'll find that with like a lot of the eruptive skin diseases, infections, dampness coupled with heat, where there's basically sepsis, putrefaction, a lot of pus accumulation, deep level of pretty bad infection. That's like an infection that's gone really bad, right? It's a good way to think of it. So Wild Indigo is going to cleanse and clear as an alternative, that heat and damp from the blood. It is antibacterial and immunostimulant, so it's going to stimulate immunity. It does have its own antibacterial properties, and that specifically is applied for the bowel, for the digestive system, and is used in a modern herbal practice for severe Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, dysentery, and it has the specific indication for, and it sounds pretty gross, but it would be kind of like blood, like basically a bloody discharge, what would be referred to as a mucopurulent discharge. Okay, so pussy, stinky blood in the stool, like sloughing off of tissue. So there's a lot of bleeding. There's severe inflammation, severe infection. The way the old doctors would describe it would be like the color of the washings of meat, which is, kind of a gross visual. But there you have it. So Wild Indigo, oftentimes there's like a leaden hue to the tissue, the mucosa, be purplish in color, pale to purplish. Very used for very serious infections of the throat. So there you would have things like diphtheria, strep throat, streptococcus infections of the throat, especially if there's abscesses, right? These are the kinds of things where you want to consider wild indigo. Abscess, pus, pockets of pus, stinky discharge. I can remember I used to get strep throat a lot when I was a kid. Pretty much every year I would get strep. And one year it was especially bad. And it was a pretty horrible time. I had my wisdom teeth removed. So I was in all this pain from the wisdom teeth being removed. And I don't know if it was associated with the wisdom teeth being removed or if it was separate, but shortly thereafter, I ended up with a really bad strep throat. So then if anyone's ever had, if you've ever had strep throat, you know, it's very, very painful. Basically feels like you're swallowing shards of broken glass coated in sand and gravel, and yeah, it's pretty awful. But what ended up happening is I ended up one of my tonsils ended up growing an abscess, and I woke up one morning and I could barely breathe because that abscess had swollen. My tonsils were touching with the big abscess on it that was actually bridging both tonsils, and I could barely breathe. So I had to go in an emergency to the ear, nose, and throat doctor, where he proceeded to stick a scalpel down the back of my throat after numbing me up and having to lance this abscess. And I remember spitting out and vomiting a little bit too, all this just really stinky pus, yellow, pale. I'm going to really paint the disgusting picture for you. Sorry for those of you that are squeamish, but I'm doing this because for me, in retrospect, when I study wild indigo and I hear about what it was indicated for, I'm like, that's what it would have been indicated for, right? Like, gross. In short, it's indicated for really gross type infections. Very useful topically, cellulitis, MRSA, impetigo, even used for venomous bites. So rattlesnake, brown recluse, black widow, those types of bites that are, severely venomous, topical and internal usage. Used traditionally for the really serious infections. We honestly, as in the modern day, don't really see that much anymore, like typhoid or dengue fever or scarlet fever or diphtheria or things like that. Used for very, very serious infection. So, yeah, indicated for mucopurulent discharge, sepsis, pus infection, discharge, stinky smells. So that's kind of how we think of wild indigo. So I think of it as this very powerful alternative to clear out that very stagnation tissue state coupled with severe heat, irritation, excitation with infection. Again, this is a low dose herb. Do not exceed 5 to 10 drops per dose. Okay, that's 5 to 10 drops, not 5 to 10 dropperfuls. It's a really important difference. Do not take 5 to 10 dropperfuls of Baptisia tinctoria. You will be in a seriously uncomfortable situation. 5 to 10 drops. I would start at 5 and see what is tolerated. Of course, topical usage is, you don't have to be quite as careful because it's topical, but internal, be very careful. So that's wild indigo. Then we have Echinacea. So Echinacea, of course, very common herb, very popular herb. Everybody that doesn't even know anything about herbal medicine has heard of Echinacea and generally knows that it does something to your immune system. But Echinacea is not just your immune stimulant for a cough or cold. I think a lot of the modern usage of Echinacea has kind of watered down our perspective on really how powerful this herb is. Because a lot of people think of Echinacea like, oh, use it at the acute onset of a cough, cold, or flu. And that's pretty much as far as it goes. Traditionally, this herb was not really seen as an immunostimulant as much as it was seen as an alternative. Again, a blood purifying alternative, plus being an immunostimulant. So it was classically used again for the heat in the blood, dyscrasias of the blood, traditionally used for venomous bites. Again, if you ever get a rattlesnake bite, man, you better chug a bottle of Echinacea, put it on topically while you're on your way to the hospital. But this herb was used for sepsis. So if someone got, a wound that went septic, they got the red streak going up the arm, that's a very dangerous situation. Echinacea was used for situations like that. Okay, so that's a really serious situation. That takes a very powerful herb to be able to address something like that. Sepsis, again, that's the red streak, that clearly like blood heat. Okay, so Echinacea is very powerful cleansing for the blood, also for the lymphatics. I think of it as a lymphatic alternative. Very good for infection when the lymph nodes are swollen. Of course, a great portion of our immunity is in our lymphatics. So it's powerfully stimulating the immune system, raising all of those immunological complexes that are responsible for protecting the body. Also appears to have some direct antibacterial, antiviral properties topically. So it has some indications for usage of things like herpes simplex cold sores, shingles, both important to consider using topically, but also internally to support the immune system. Whenever you get those types of herpetic lesions, outbreaks, when that virus crawls out of your nervous system and you get the tingling and the pain and the nerve pain, your immune system is working very hard. And so Echinacea is a very useful remedy to consider for things of that nature. Again, the eclectics, the physiomedicalists, we're using Echinacea like baptisia for very serious diseases. We don't really see that much anymore, likely because of I would say modern sanitation is a big part of that. As soon as we got better sanitation in, city environments and things like that, a lot of those infectious diseases just went down. People aren't drinking, dirty water, things like that. So typhoid, scarlet fever, diphtheria, again, a lot of those things we don't really see too much anymore. So powerful immune stimulant, lymphatic alternative. Good remedy, Echinacea. And then we have garlic. This is a very incredibly powerful herb, even though it's in most people's kitchen. Obviously, we tend to think of garlic culinarily. Don't overlook its potency and power as a medicinal herb. This plant is very, very good to know how to use, because even if you're consulting with someone remotely, say they live by themselves, they're super sick, they can't even get to the store. This is where knowing your kitchen remedials can be super helpful, and garlic is key on that list. Most people got a fresh head of garlic in their kitchen, and this is a really good one to know, especially for the respiratory tract. It's a very powerful lung affinity. I was mentioning this in last week's post where I briefly mentioned garlic, but garlic has such a strong respiratory tract affinity that you could soak your feet in a garlic foot bath, right? Just hot water with some cloves of garlic crushed in it, and you will end up having garlic breath. Those sulfur compounds absorb through the skin, travel through the blood, and are excreted through the lungs. Very powerful antibacterial effects from garlic. I always like to say that not much can survive in the garlic environment. There's something about those sulfur compounds that they're powerful, right? I mean, just think of if you go to maybe give your spouse a kiss and they got the garlic breath. It's like, whoa, it's not super pleasant, right? Well, I think it's not super pleasant for bacteria and fungi and various pathogens either. So garlic is quite specific for the respiratory tract, but it does work through the blood as well. Obviously, those sulfur compounds are traveling through the bloodstream. So any type of systemic infection, and I think that's the big theme with these 3 herbs, is that while yes, garlic has a strong affinity for the respiratory tract and baptisia has a strong affinity for the digestive system, they all move through the blood. They all get into the blood, which is where you're getting these more system-wide infectious states. They also are stimulating, right? They're moving, especially garlic, moving cold, moving dampness. This is a very hot, pungent herb. I mean, this is one of the hottest herbs that we have. 4th degree hot. It can burn your skin, right? Remember my first herb book. I don't even remember what the herb book was. Terrible herb book though. Awful herb book. Because I used to get some acne when I was in my teenage years, and there was something in there that was like, yeah, for acne, slice a fresh clove of garlic and put it on, and it'll help your acne go away. And so I tried that out, and it raised a big old blister on my face. It made it way worse. And, the Greeks classified garlic as hot in the 4th degree. It can burn your skin. So it's very, very hot. This herb is stimulant in a variety of ways. It stimulates circulation. It is a stimulant diaphoretic. It is a stimulant expectorant. It gets to the deepest layers of the lungs and removes that cold damp. This is why it's a very useful remedy for those deep respiratory infections, damp type pneumonias and things of that nature, which of course is very serious and sometimes hard to address because you got to get herbs that will get that deep into the respiratory system. So garlic has, it does other things other than use for infectious states. One of which is for the cardiovascular system and has a bit of a blood thinning effect. And so this can be very helpful with bringing blood flow to areas that have poor circulation, where there might be a lot of damp accumulation, stagnation from infection, right? You got an infected area, there's a high turnover, a great degree of metabolic waste products accumulating, pus accumulation, just poor circulation, poor blood flow. So not only by warming and driving and moving the blood that way, it's actually going to thin that blood a little bit so that it can get to areas of poor circulation. Garlic is very broad spectrum, anti-amoebic, anti-protozoal, antibacterial. Very useful herb to consider for biofilms, right? This is another area where you get this kind of evolution of bacteria where they form these networks of interconnected. It's like a lot of bacteria in a way coming together to form a quote unquote greater entity, right? Like a new self-organized system is the biofilm, and they can be very difficult to treat, very difficult to break up, and they can become very resistant to drugs very quickly. Because they have a higher degree of self-organization, they're able to evolve and adapt more quickly, basically. And so garlic's very useful for those biofilms, very useful for topical applications. Of course, needing to make sure you administer that garlic effectively for topical application, meaning don't put it on straight. You usually want to mix it with other things to temper its effects. A good way of doing that actually is mixing it in with a demulcent powder, such as slippery elm or marshmallow root, and that's a way of tempering that garlic for topical application. So this is these are kind of the high level overview of these 3 herbs: wild indigo, echinacea, and garlic. Now I want to talk a little bit more about some of the commonalities of action, some of the different primary uses, and some of the other dynamics to consider with this triplet. But first, I want to make sure that you know about our upcoming free workshop that is happening in just a few weeks here at the School of Evolutionary Herbalism. The Herbal Monograph Map is going to be happening very soon. So be sure to keep your eyes on your inbox. If you're not on our email list, head on over to evolutionaryherbalism.com, sign up so you can be the first to know about when we open up free registration for the Herbal Monograph Map. This is your detailed, dialed framework for how to create your own holistic, clinically oriented herbal monographs so that you can know the essential things that you need to know about a plant in order to use it effectively, efficiently, and holistically. There's a lot of different types of monographs out there. Some of them focus on folklore, some of them focus on botany, some of them focus on chemistry, some of them focus on safety. What are the essential things you need to know about an herb in order to use it clinically effectively, right? And so this whole workshop series is geared towards you knowing how to do research on herbs, put it together into an effective clinical monograph for easy reference. We're going to talk about how to do that. What are the essentials you need to know about an herb, how to do your research, how to put it together. We're also going to be including a whole bunch of really great templates and resources for you to use so that you can ultimately work with your plants in an effective manner. So be sure to choose Simple Monograph Map coming out in just a couple weeks here at School of Evolutionary Herbalism. Again, head on over to our website at evolutionaryherbalism.com. We'll put a link in the description below for you to get on the waiting list. Join the email list if you're not on there already. And be sure to join us. It's going to be an awesome workshop. This is one of my favorite free workshops that we do because this was the stuff I wish someone had taught me when I was first starting on my plant path. So be sure to check it out. Okay, let's get back to our triplet from the British Herbal Pharmacopeia. Commonalities, right? Here are the net actions of this triplet. This is notably antibacterial, alterative, immune stimulant, okay? That's the main way I think of this. So it's addressing these infectious states from a multitude of angles, right? It's stimulating immunity, your innate host resistance. It's cleansing and clearing all the waste products, dead bacteria, dead white blood cells. It's clearing all that out. And then it's having an actual antibacterial effect on the pathogen itself. It's having effects on circulation, on immunity, on the mucosa, especially the respiratory mucosa, especially the digestive mucosa. It's affecting the lymphatics. It's affecting the blood. All three of these herbs traditionally used for strong infections and poisonings of the blood, the skin, and any type of putrid type conditions. All are broad spectrum in their actions due to their affinity for the blood, mucosa, and immunity, right? These are tissues and organs that are systemically distributed, right? The mucosa, you got mucosa in your lungs, in your GI, in your urinary tract. The blood obviously is circulating everywhere through your body. Your immune system obviously is distributed throughout your whole body. Your lymphatics is distributed everywhere, right? So these herbs affect organ systems that are universally distributed throughout the body, and that gives them a very broad spectrum, far-reaching effect. Now, some of the differences, baptisia and echinacea are cooling. Garlic obviously is hot. So we get a little bit of a nice temperance there in the energetics. Now you have drastic biochemical differences amongst these herbs, especially in terms of the antibacterial property. So with wild indigo, you have alkaloids. With garlic, you've got these sulfur compounds. In echinacea, you've got the alkylamides. So you have a broad spectrum, you have a diversity of constituent types in these remedies that gives it a much nice, broad-reaching effects. So primary uses, I would use this for serious infections of the throat, the digestive system, the skin, or dyscrasias of the blood, poisonings of the blood. I would consider this for antibiotic resistant infections, mucopurulent discharges. So that would be like pus, infections that have gone to the point of generating pus. So that would be in the sinuses, in the teeth, dental kind of issues, in the tonsils, in the throat, like I was explaining before, and the digestive system as well. Basically, anytime there's pus accumulation, and topically on the skin too, stinky smells, right? That's when you want to reach for this. Poor healing wounds. These are the instances where you would consider this. Now, again, caution, wild indigo is very strong. This is a low dose herb. Do not exceed 5 to 10 drops per dose. I would not use this herb or this compound for pregnant women. I would not use this for women that are lactating. Overdose can seriously irritate the digestive system and induce vomiting. So just be cautious there. That's mainly wild indigo stuff. Garlic is very hot and can, it can irritate the upper digestive system. Especially the most effective way to take garlic really is fresh clove that's crushed and allowed to oxidize for 10 minutes or so. That's what really activates the sulfur compounds in garlic. There's some biochemical transformation that occurs with the oxidation. It's funny, usually we don't really like oxidation, right? We prefer things not to oxidize, but garlic is like, we want garlic to oxidize. That is what is going to bring out its antibacterial properties much more effectively. But generally, you don't want to take it on an empty stomach. You might want to mix it with something to temper its heat, whether that be mixed with like a demulcent powder. A great way to ingest garlic, my preferred way, would be mixed in a bit of honey. So you just get some garlic, mix it in a spoonful of honey, and take it that way. Same when it goes to applying it topically. Topical for garlic, crushing it and mixing it with some manuka honey is really nice, because manuka honey also has some very nice antibacterial properties. Okay, so an example combination of these three herbs is going to be, I would say, 80 to 90% echinacea, and then 5 to 10% wild indigo, 5 to 10% garlic. This would be tincture formula. Now, I think this is would be at best done as a tincture, because this is just too harsh, really, to take any other way. No one is going to drink a tea of these herbs. It's going to just taste so incredibly foul. You could use it as a tea for a topical wash. Tincture is honestly going to be best if you were to pre-combine these together. Garlic isn't really commonly prepared as a tincture. You can, for many, it's a little too harsh, but you can use it as a tincture. So predominant of this formula is echinacea, and that's mainly because if you're taking high amounts of this tincture, you need to be careful how much of that wild indigo. So with low dose herbs, the dosing of those herbs is really, really important. So, for example, if you were taking a 5 milliliter dose of this formula, and say you had it 80% echinacea, 10% wild indigo, 10% garlic. Well, if you're taking 5 mils of that formula and 10% of that is wild indigo, that means you just move the decimal point over 1 for the percentage, and you're getting approximately half a mil of wild indigo, which is about 10 drops. So that's the higher end of the range that you would want to be taking of wild indigo. So I wouldn't really want to exceed that too much. And 5 mils is a pretty strong dose. If you were to take that in half, 2.5 to 3 mils, right, you'd be getting about 5 drops of the wild indigo. So when you use 10% wild indigo The 5 mil range is the top end of your dosage. Better to start at 2 to 3 mils and see how someone responds, right? Some people are very sensitive to wild indigo, so you don't want to take too much. I would consider tempering this formula by adding a little bit of licorice. If you wanted to augment this formula a little bit, what the licorice would do would be soften the harshness of the garlic. It would also temper a little bit of the toxicity, quote unquote, of the wild indigo. This is a common way licorice is used in formulation to kind of just temper, harmonize the formula, so to speak, make it a little less harsh, make it less likely to cause an adverse side effect. So I would consider adding, maybe 5 to 10% licorice. You could do then 70% echinacea, and then 10% each of wild indigo, garlic, and licorice. Of course, you generally want to avoid licorice in people with high blood pressure, so there would be an added contraindication. So that's one way you could augment this triplet a little bit to just kind of calm it down. But I think a good way to do a formula like this, honestly, would be to do your echinacea and your wild indigo as tinctures mixed into a spoonful of honey with a crushed clove of garlic in it. And I know that's a little more involved than a lot of people would probably want to deal with, but I think that's going to give you the best effect from the garlic. And it's also a way of just really ensuring your dosing is right for the wild indigo. So you would go spoonful of honey with the crushed garlic in it, put your 5 drops of wild indigo on there, take your couple squirts of echinacea tincture, and then take a spoonful of that. It's a little more involved than a lot of people would want to deal with, but that's how I would do it if I was just taking this myself, because I personally prefer using, for one, I don't have garlic tincture on hand. It's not one that I prepare, just because I feel like it's a little too harsh. I like crushing the garlic and taking it with a spoonful of honey. So that is our amazing, awesome, super powerful, super effective antiseptic triplet, Baptisia tinctoria, Allium sativum, and Echinacea purpurea or angustifolia. And hadn't done an anatomy of a formula for a while, and I thought it was fun to stick with the anti-theme here for January. So thank you very much for making it to the end of this episode of The Plant Path. I'd be curious to hear if anyone has ever used any of these herbs. Feel free to drop it in the comments below. If there is a comment section below, usually that's just on YouTube. If you are anywhere other than the website, be sure to head on over to evolutionaryherbalism.com. It's where everything is happening, including our herbal monograph map free workshop series, which is being released in just a couple weeks. So be sure you're on our email list. Be sure you know about it. Sign up now. It's 100% free. And we are just committed to providing excellent herbal education to the community of herbalists out there in the world. And I thank you very much for taking the time to tune in to The Plant Path. Until the next one, take care and be well.